Good afternoon, all. I trust you would have had a great lunch and enjoyed the gastronomical delights on offer. In fact, let's give a round of applause to the team here at the Marriott for keeping us well fed and watered thus far, doing a fantastic job. We now move into session number 2 for today, which looks at an area that can basically make or break everything. That is the area of finance. And so this session will explore innovative solutions to promote Africa-Caribbean trade and investments. And now we invite our moderator, Ms. Anita Erskine, Executive Director of Erskine Global Communications. Let's put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll be on the phone, calling you.
Oh, Mr. DJ, did you really do that for me? Ladies and gentlemen, do you feel like Africa is in the building? Oh, no, that's not enough. Is Africa in the building? Is Ghana in the building? All right, Mr. DJ. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you about this partnership between these two regions? So you will applaud 3 times and I will instruct you. If you are of African origin or Caribbean origin and you were just waiting for all these barriers to be removed, give me a round of applause. 2, can I hear the wildest round of applause for all the women in the building? 3, if from here, though we're talking about trade and investment and everything else in between, if from here you believe that your mindset has changed and you've adopted the power mindset, then please give me the 3rd round of applause. And you are going to say after me, we are making future. My brothers and sisters in Ghana and Nigeria and South Africa and Rwanda didn't hear you. My brothers and sisters in Bahamas and St. Lucia didn't hear you. We are making future. My name is Anita Erskine. I'm from the beautiful Republic of Ghana. And I'm here to moderate a conversation that is crucial. Options for overcoming financing constraints to Afri-Caribbean Trade and Investment Corporation. The talking is enough. The conversations, we're done. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move into action. They said we couldn't do it. Let us prove that we were ready a long time ago. So we're having this conversation about trade and investment. We will openly and transparently talk about the challenges and the hurdles, but in that same vein, also talk about the opportunities and essentially walk away with a list that I call the to-do list for the double bottom line, which I call African prosperity and Caribbean prosperity. We have 2 keynotes, 5 minutes each, and please, I need you to give an Afri-Caribbean applause every single time I mention my speakers, because they have a wealth of knowledge that will change our perspective. So please, with a resounding round of applause, my first keynote will be given to us by Honorable Walrond, and Honorable Walrond is the Minister of Tourism, Industry, and Commerce, Co-operative Republic of Guyana. A resounding round of applause. Please, I'm from Ghana, it wasn't loud enough. Louder than that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Erskine. I was told that I was given 10 minutes. I will use my gender privilege to take the extra 5. Dr. Leon, President of the Caribbean Development Bank, panelists all, with the interest of time, I will save calling your names, but welcome you all, the special invited guests, attendees all. It is my honor to provide remarks at this second Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum under the theme, Creating a Shared Prosperous Future. I wish to begin by extending a warm welcome to our brothers and sisters from the continent of Africa, our family from the Caribbean, and our esteemed visitors from across the world. Welcome to beautiful Guyana. I trust that your time with us will be so enriching, captivating, that it ignites a strong desire for you to return. I'm extremely pleased that Guyana is hosting the Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum 2023. My appreciation stems firstly from the fact that our hosting this forum demonstrates the bonds of friendship and commerce between the Caribbean and Africa. Of special significance to me in my role as Minister with the responsibility for tourism is the fact that our ability to host this event demonstrates that we are on the path to the realization of our strategic objective of making Guyana a preferred destination for global and regional events. It is equally gratifying that this forum is effectively a progressive step from the initial dialogue and framework established in Bridgetown, Barbados, a year ago. Guyana, like several other member states within CARICOM, is committed to fortifying this relationship, and we are prepared to work with our Caribbean counterparts to chart a clear way forward. Despite our strong history, ancestral connections, and friendships, our regions have largely operated in silos for centuries. This parallel economic and diplomatic approach is evident by the extent of trade between the Caribbean and Africa. In 2022, exports from the Caribbean to Africa only accounted for just over 4% from the region. This statistic alone constitutes a compelling reason for us to have the conversations that we plan to have over the course of this forum. It is essential that we build on the enthusiasm and momentum established by the pioneers of this initiative to proactively pursue the objectives and targets they laid out. This forum is being held in a time when global challenges are perhaps the most severe as they have been in recent memory. The global economy continues to face a multitude of economic challenges, including the protracted hostilities resulting from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, high levels of inflation globally, and the lingering impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In light of these and other factors, global growth for 2023 is now estimated at 3%, compared to the 3.5% growth recorded in 2022. Similarly, Latin America and the Caribbean are projected to grow by 2.3% in 2023, compared to the 4.1% a year earlier. In sub-Saharan Africa, growth is projected to decline from 4% in 2022 to 3.3% in 2023. We have, of course, within recent weeks, seen conflicts erupting anew in the Middle East, which further threatens global stability and the world's economic order. These crises have not only inflicted a human cost, but have exposed the vulnerability of our world's food and energy supplies, with global inflation peaking at 8.7% last year and projected to remain elevated at 6.9% in 2023. Despite these global challenges, however, this forum is being held at a period that is the most historic and transformational for the people of Guyana and the Guyanese economy. Largely as a result of increased oil production, Guyana was the fastest growing economy in the world in 2022, with an estimated growth rate of 63.3%. For the period 2023 to 2026, Guyana is projected to grow by an average of 25% annually. The unprecedented development and transformation underway are driven by the strategic and forward-looking approach of our government aimed at building a modern, inclusive, innovative, and sustainable economy. We aim to achieve these objectives by leveraging the returns of the development of our oil and gas sector and the opening up of associated opportunities with improved access to resources that will serve to accelerate our growth and development. This incredible economic outlook brings tremendous opportunities, including prospects for greater cooperation with our regional partners, both in government and private sector. Here in Guyana, the oil boon, and I deliberately use the word boon and not boom, which inevitably is followed by a bust. We see the boon of ours as the means of providing the impetus to change the fortunes of Guyana and our countries that make up CARICOM. And it gives us some space to address one of the binding constraints to our development, and I speak, of course, of access to finance. Access to finance remains one of the most debilitating constraints to development in our respective economies, and this constraint severely impacts our prospects for trading with each other. The lack of access to finance results from, among other factors, limited access to capital, limited financial system infrastructure, and the lack of access to international financial institutions where capital is available at concessionary rates. The problem of graduation and consequent loss of access to concessionary lending is particularly concerning. So too is the loss of correspondent banking relationships as international banks elect to exit our markets rather than make the efforts to seek economically feasible ways in which to achieve compliance with AML and FATF requirements. The outlook for the mobilization of development assistance in the short to medium term, thus, at first glance, does not seem promising. However, in the challenging environment in which we African and Caribbean nations find ourselves, there is need to secure the levels of private and public financing that are required to address the development challenges faced by our regions. According to the Financing for Sustainable Development Report 2023, the forecast for financing is described as, I quote, a lasting sustainable development divide, as sustainable development goal financing are growing, but development financing is not keeping pace, close quote. Ladies and gentlemen, if this scenario is left unaddressed, the financial divide will become a lasting sustainable development gap. There is a continued need for immediate and increased international support for vulnerable countries, including many least development countries, African countries, and small island development states. Access to finance is also a key requirement for the establishment, growth, and success of both small and large-scale businesses, as well as the economic empowerment of individuals and households. In this regard, institutions such as the Afreximbank and the Caribbean Development Bank can play pivotal roles in mobilizing capital and mitigating risks to promote Afri-Caribbean trade and investment. We were advised that at the end of 2021, the African Exim Bank total assets and guarantees stood at about US $25 billion, and that it disbursed more than US $51 billion between 2016 and 2021. And we heard earlier that the total assets of the bank now stands at $35 billion. In this regard, we acknowledge with sincere appreciation that the Board of Directors of the Exim Bank in December 2022 approved US $1.5 billion funding to enable member states of the Caribbean community that have ratified a partnership agreement with the bank to tap into various financial instruments. We also know the potential for that envelope to double to $3 billion on the full participation of Caribbean member states. The financing approved by the Board of Directors of the Exim Bank enables CARICOM countries to access bank financing instruments through financing facilities that support identified economic sectors, including tourism, healthcare, renewable energy, shipping, mining, agriculture, and agribusiness. Exim Bank will therefore work to support local financial institutions to source finance for SMEs. We are fortunate that in this era, our people have access to development banks such as the Exim Bank and the Caribbean Development Bank, the latter of which has been with us for almost 50 years. These organizations have a vested interest in providing funding for development purposes that improve the lives of all the people on the African continent and those in the Caribbean. Against the context that I have outlined, permit me to briefly traverse some suggested mechanisms, especially with respect to access to finance, which may, to a greater or lesser degree, hold some promise as solutions to the issues that face us. First, fostering partnerships between public and private sectors to fund infrastructure projects such as ports, transportation, and energy facilities can leverage private sector expertise and capital while sharing the risks and rewards. Private enterprises can introduce groundbreaking technologies, inventive financing models, and state-of-the-art construction techniques, resulting in cost reduction and enhanced project outcomes. Furthermore, private sector involvement serves as an indicator to potential investors of the project's financial viability and increased likelihood of success. For mitigating risks, there could be the trade credit insurance programs to protect business against non-payment or insolvency of trading partners. This can alleviate the risk associated with international trade and boost investor confidence. Other financial risk mitigation instruments can also include currency hedges, political risk insurance, and credit guarantees to protect investors and lenders from potential financial losses in volatile markets. Second, we must work together to persuade international financial institutions to provide long-term patient capital for investment projects in both Africa and the Caribbean. This is a crucial strategy for promoting economic development and trade. Third, venture capital and startup funding could be explored to foster the growth of a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem by providing capital and startup funding for innovative businesses and technologies. Another recommendation is to explore debt for development swaps, where a portion of the external debt of African and Caribbean countries is restructured into long-term investments in critical sectors like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. There's also need to explore the exploration of more wide-ranging regional and bilateral trade agreements that offer preferential trade terms and investment protections. These agreements can stimulate cross-border trade and investment by reducing barriers and providing legal safeguards. Further, this partnership can more effectively use technology to improve access to finance, payment systems, and digital lending, making it easier for businesses and individuals to engage in trade and investment. Here, it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge that it was Kenya which led the world in mobile finance technology with the pioneering rollout of M-Pesa mobile money transfer service. Furthermore, it is equally noteworthy to underscore that at the helm of this innovative endeavor was a distinguished Guyanese-born business leader, Bob Collymore, who at his all too premature death was described by then President Kenyatta as a distinguished corporate leader whose contribution to our national well-being will be missed. I highlight this pioneering nature of this particular initiative to emphasize that we in the Global South have within us the capability to bring best-in-class solutions to issues facing this world. Finally, I would suggest promoting the issuance of green bonds to fund sustainable and
So good afternoon to all. Let me begin by indicating it's a distinct honor and privilege to address you in this land whose slogan is one people, one nation, one destiny. And I want to say indeed that is a fitting summary of who we are and who we can be. So I want to begin first by thanking President of the Republic of Guyana, the African Export-Import Bank, and the conference organizers for extending an invitation to the Caribbean Development Bank to join you in these deliberations. So today, we gathered to explore ways to overcome financing constraints and propose innovative, future-fit solutions to facilitate the blossoming and blooming of Africa-Caribbean trade and investment cooperation. In fact, let me state at the outset that I view this as an investment opportunity in altering the narrative of the Middle Passage to the creation of a future path underwritten by unity, solidarity, and partnership to harness the potential of our collective creativity and ingenuity. Consequently, my remarks today will be set in the realm of how we can use trade to move our economies from the periphery to the center. So let's establish at the beginning that at CDB, trade is considered a central pathway to the transformational agenda of our economies. Now, this is not a new insight. In fact, it's always been that. Indeed, throughout our historical journey, trade and commerce have always been instrumental in knitting our societies together, fostering development, and most importantly, in shifting powers. However, trade between the Caribbean and Africa has traditionally been modest. According to a 2022 International Trade Center study, less than 1% of exports are exchanged between the two regions. This must change. In the next 5 years, the potential exists to transform this ratio to 25% in both directions between the regions. This potential cooperation, especially in agriculture, energy, tourism, and technology, can reframe the existing account of the Middle Passage from one of pain, trauma, and trafficking in black bodies to one of trade, technology, and geopolitical strength. Bolstering trade is mission critical for our countries to move from the periphery to the center. Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa details how colonialism and economic controls influenced the continent's underdevelopment. Countries in Africa were seen primarily as sources of raw material for European industries, with little reverse direction investment. Growth trajectories were further disrupted through the imposition of external systems, leaving these countries anchored firmly in the periphery. In the Caribbean, we suffered a similar fate, producing sugar and other commodities for export, only to be relegated to the periphery when the center changed their appetites and could source those products more cheaply elsewhere. But it didn't end there. In the post-slavery, post-colonial era, our economies are still organized in the context and construct of a plantation economy, of course minus the forced labor. Sustained colonial ties, the continued provision of goods and services to a center, mostly Europe, and required compliance with international rules have meant that the region has remained structurally dependent on an external center and being constrained in achieving economic growth and human development. By now, it is no secret that trade between our two regions has challenges, including inadequate transport links between Africa and the Caribbean, tariffs, customs procedures, and differing regulatory standards, pricing competition from larger economies that overshadow bilateral trade facilitation, and an understandable lack of appreciation that transitions to development may require choices that ought to view prices from a longer-run dependency and sustainability perspective and less so on today's purchasing power. The question is, how do we chart a different future and identify solutions that will change our situation? My friends, trade by its very nature is not just an exchange of commodities. It is an exchange of culture, knowledge, and progress. Both Africa and the Caribbean share a common past marked by struggle, resilience, and a continuous quest for self-definition. Our intertwined histories, born of resistance to subjugation, provide the bedrock upon which we can forge an economic partnership. Increasing trade between Africa and the Caribbean means fortifying shared histories, strengthening shared values, and developing shared visions. This translates to customizing our peculiarities to advance our circumstances, embracing resilient prosperity, technological growth, and the elevation of our shared global stance. I ask you to indulge me by closing your eyes and picture trade first as economic resilience. When we unlock the potential of intercontinental trade, we open doors to trade creation, technological advancement, and infrastructural development. So let us reimagine a future where African technology startups are commonplace in the Caribbean, and Caribbean agricultural produce is a staple in African households. Now picture trade as a socio-political shift. By enhancing trade, we indirectly fortify our global position, moving our countries from being mere spectators to active participants in the global narrative. A united Afri-Caribbean bloc can redefine global trade dynamics, making our voices heard in international forums and shifting the balance of power. Picture trade as a power of innovative resilience. Innovation is not just a buzzword, but the lifeblood of thriving economies, especially for developing nations in Africa and the Caribbean. Nobel laureate Sir Arthur Lewis once remarked, "The fundamental cure for poverty is not money, but knowledge." Indeed, it is this very knowledge, this spirit of innovation, that we must harness and cultivate. And let us be clear, we do not have a comparative disadvantage in knowledge creation. In fact, our knowledge capacity can be our playing field leveler on the global stage, converting challenges into opportunities. Picture now the concept of building prosperity through resilience, which is not just about accumulating wealth, but ensuring that our growth is resilient to shocks, ensuring our prosperity is sustainable over the long run. However, resilience and prosperity are intertwined. To attain and sustain prosperity, we must be resilient. And the key to resilience is innovation, which can be achieved in our minds only through an ecosystem approach. And there are 4 elements to this. The first is, to innovate, we need to be able to measure better. Refining our metrics, understanding better our specific circumstances, and then directing investments more strategically, ensuring that each dollar is truly fit for its intended purpose. In this regard, I propose that we commit the next decade to a regional connectivity transformative backbone, a world where all of our countries are seamlessly connected in the following areas. Energy connectivity, where sustainable energy resources are shared, harnessing the abundance of one region to address the deficit of another. Digital connectivity, where broadband networks bridge information gaps, fostering knowledge and technology transfer. And transport connectivity, with integrated air and marine logistics, enabling swift, efficient movement, and thereby accelerating trade and integration. So that's the first measure. The second is financing. There we need to address the point that is our Achilles heel: vulnerability and resilience, because that is what is not captured in any of the instruments we have. So I propose we introduce a wide class of contingent financing instruments tailored to mitigate risks, the de-risking that the minister spoke about, tailored to mitigate risks from our high structural vulnerabilities and low resilience, thereby optimizing the use of our abundant regional resources. The third, capacity building. Re-engineer traditional training programs to empower our people to think creatively, act decisively, and break the shackle of dependency. Let us therefore commit to investment in capacity building, making it an inherent component of every phase in the investment cycle. And fourth, partnerships. Sharing responsibilities and burdens through dynamic partnerships in knowledge creation, in financing, in technology sharing, and in productivity enhancing methods. So you may ask, how can we achieve these crucial innovations? We propose a framework that targets real development outcomes and the means to finance and implement these through promoting complementary efforts instead of constrained from siloed perspectives of private and public sector domains, until we break the silo, the distrust between the public and the private sector, and forge a complementary, harmonious relationship to deal with national goals. We will not have the public-private partnerships that we need to embrace. That is the essence of the New Deal between the private and the public sectors that we speak about. The finance required, to be honest, is more than any one institution can provide. It is more than any one instrument can facilitate. Therefore, we at the CDB have proposed a multi-source, multi-instrument approach, underpinned in partnership by an appropriate market infrastructure and good practice regulatory and governance frameworks. Therefore, we equally propose, by working collaboratively, CDB and Afreximbank can transition our countries to the heart of global economic dynamics, recast our economies from the periphery to the center, and fostering investment initiatives that promote SDGs and transform the lives of our people. And to be able to do all of that, let me share with you a few financing solutions. One, a trade facilitation and export promotion fund that will offer low-interest loans, credit guarantees, or grants to businesses. And I would urge, let us move with urgency to establish and finance it. Second, promote venture capital and private equity funds with a focus on trade between Africa and the Caribbean. These funds can offer financial support, mentorship, and market access in renewable energy, connectivity, food security, digitalization, and climate mitigation and adaptation. Very specific. Fourth, we need to grow a regional resource mobilization ecosystem that will allow deployment of regional resources. Redeploy our national insurance funds, the credit union deposits, the funds that are sitting in the commercial banks, in the assets under management. Redeploy those to effect our development agenda. Make it finance with a purpose. And lastly, support an increase in the use of fintech to promote the use of digital payments, peer-to-peer lending platforms, and supply chain financing. So as I conclude, I invite us to create the future we want and need. A future where every country, irrespective of size or wealth, plays an integral role in the collective, integrated march towards resilient prosperity. For us, this is not just a vision. It is a mission requiring our collective effort. Let us therefore commit today to not just talking the talk, but to laying of flagstones along the path to resilient prosperity. But let us equally commit to bringing our people along with us every step of this journey, as ultimately they are the ones who must benefit from everything that we do. Thank you.
Dr. Leon, thank you very much for the minutes, the extra minutes that you took. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I have only 30 minutes to have a very important conversation. We'll get right to it. Please give an AfriCaribbean warm welcome to my first panelist, Miss Patricia R. Francis, CD, who is a chairperson, Trade Facilitation Task Force, Government of Jamaica. It needs to be louder than that, everybody. We've just had lunch. Please also welcome Dr. Gobind Ganga, Governor, Bank of Guyana. The Governor of the Central Bank of Barbados is with us. Please welcome Dr. Greenidge. The Acting Director, Trade and Corporate Finance, Afreximbank, Mr. Ayman El Zogbi. Please welcome Mr. Chris Oshiafi, Group Managing Director, Pan-African Capital Holdings. Last, definitely not the least, please welcome Mr. Floyd Haynes, Chairman, New Haven Merchant Bank, Guyana. One, two. Ladies and gentlemen, please another round of applause for my panelists. Patricia, it is cold here, isn't it, being the only two women on the panel? But let's make it warm, and let me start off with you. Now, I would like to know, we're talking about opportunity, we're also talking about challenges, obviously. Patricia, in your mind, where do you think the greatest opportunity to move the needle between the Caribbean and Africa is?
Is this working?
It is working.
Great. Thank you very much, and very pleased to be here. From my perspective, where I sit, I really do believe that we have to start from investment. That's where I think we have an opportunity, because we have a number, both regions have companies, strong companies, that can actually play in this area. And I think infrastructure is where we ought to start. And it's a great platform. We could talk about, we've heard everybody talking about the deficit in both sides. So whether it is we're talking about ports, telecoms, services of all sorts, the oil and gas industry, or whether we're talking about our large local companies that are doing consumer goods or fintech payments and things like that, insurance, banking. These are companies that can come together to look at the projects that actually are on the ground that need to be financed. And I believe that if we can get these companies together, that indeed you can build a kind of trust and confidence, which is important to build any kind of trade on. We're not going to see trade moving exponentially unless we can build that trust and confidence. And I think, if we take Jamaica for an example, I am part of a company called Jamaica Producers, which is now Pan Jamaica Group. And we have been investing in Africa for a long time. We've been buying bananas out of Cameroon for ages. We have the largest fresh fruit juice company in Europe, and we buy fruit from Africa, but we don't count that as being Caribbean. So, Grace Kennedy, others are doing the same kind of thing. Now, how do we, we're sort of behaving like Europeans, but how do we transform that relationship which we currently have into something which we can build together between the two continents, the continent and this region, where we can actually scale up, as Mia Mottley was saying, into new things and build on the areas that we really need to build on. And I think, of course, private equity is one of those things that we just spoke about, and that's Dr. Leander spoke about, and that's something which I think is really important. Of course, I also speak on behalf of Portland Private Equity, which is launching a new fund now, and this can be something which can be utilized to finance some of these entrepreneurs that we think are important in the region. So I think investment, let's look at investment. Let's look at the projects. How can we use the capital markets that we currently have, the innovation that we currently have, and take that and move with that? Because I think that's the low-hanging fruit.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Ganga, I bring this conversation to you. We're looking at that double bottom line. We're looking at Africa's prosperity. We're also looking at Caribbean's prosperity. But in there, we've heard the word sharing, shared experiences, shared everything. What would be the value of perhaps opening up a dialogue, sharing information between our central banks?
Thank you. Madam Moderator, you have been doing an excellent job so far.
Thank you very much.
For some reason, I thought you were Guyanese. Anyhow, we all know globalization has been connecting us ever more than what we would have expected. That is, we are more now connected with respect to our country and the world. With this partnership moving forward, that is this Caribbean, African continent, our region, obviously, and the African continent can benefit tremendously from mutual prosperity. To begin with, a forum of central bank governors or central bankers of this region and that of the continent would obviously bring tremendous benefit from the perspective of, say, sharing of information, that is economic information, financial information, information that will inform stakeholders in terms of where opportunities are and how to overcome challenges. The sharing of information is also very important because what it will provide regulatory framework and governance standards that are mutually beneficial and would be what we call cross-border standards, which are acceptable worldwide. Because if we're going to have this kind of a relationship with respect to trade and investment, all stakeholders need to be told, yes, we have certain standards that we have to follow. And these standards are very important for success in terms of whatever transactions are being undertaken. A forum of central bankers would not only provide for, say, regulatory standard from the perspective of financial stability, but it will help mitigate, for example, arbitrage with respect to regulation. And here I'm getting into a new phase or the new thought process or the new sexy things that is happening, that is digitalization. All of us know that digitalization is globalization in a different form and way. Digitalization requires a certain type of regulation. And these regulations obviously need cooperation. And that is where, for example, a forum of central bankers will ensure that there is no arbitrage with respect to regulation, especially from the perspective of digitalization. We also have to look at cooperation, how it can help in capacity development, how it can help in terms of sharing of technology. Because obviously, if we are not up there technologically speaking, we are not going to benefit from whatever opportunity is going to be offering to us. Other regions will come in and they will be able to, I would say, just between our legs, take away whatever opportunities are offered. So from the perspective of cooperation, we need to have such a forum. It's very important. And I could tell you, if you're going to have any success in any way, or people who are actively involved to ensure that success will happen, it will be the central bankers.
Thank you so much. Dr. Greenwich, we are hearing about standardization. Standardization. What element of perhaps currency can be included in this conversation about standardization? Can we perhaps, Caribbean, Africa, can we trade in our own local currencies? Can that be our standard?
Good evening. Thank you very much for the question. I don't think it is a matter of can we think. Yes, definitely we can, and we're on our way to doing that. I think it's a necessary part of the integration process. It's already happening among the African countries via the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. To have that between Caribbean and African continent, that currency conversion mechanism is what we have agreed at the level of the governors in principle, that we will look to adopt this payment system, which allows, in the first stage, us in the Caribbean to buy and sell goods and services using our own local currency, and if we adopt the system. And that in of itself not only promotes growth in terms of trade and investment facilitation, it also eliminates transaction costs. Since it's a settlement in the net position, it saves us some foreign currency. It promotes financial inclusion. We don't have to source US dollars when trading between Guyana, for example, and Barbados. We can settle in each other's currency. Now we're looking to start a pilot program, Barbados and Bahamas, and we're looking for a third central bank in the region to come in, so we... A third central bank. I don't want to put my brother under pressure to come in with us, because we have to iron out the kinks and see how it works, etc. In my belief, and we have a meeting early in November and probably discuss it in Jamaica this week, how to move forward. Once we have that working in the region, and it will facilitate growth and development, then the next step will be how to make it work across our continents. It goes on to what Brother Gobin was saying in terms of corporations. We have to have functional cooperation between the central banks in the African continent and the Caribbean in terms of standardization, regulations, how any regulatory barriers, etc., to move forward. That we've already, a number of us have these relationships already, but it will be making it even wider. And once that's up and running, then it's just go from there. We need, of course, some trade agreements, and Afreximbank in the Caribbean and Barbados is part of that process, facilitating it. As Jean Leon said earlier, we need some financing facilities. The agreement that was signed in last year early, before to pave the way for Afreximbank to be part of Barbados, was a framework agreement. And then that sets out agreements which Jean Leon talked about, where funds like credit facilities, guarantee facilities, those things we have to work with the Afreximbank to try to pave out. That will also help with the movement and facilitating that trade, guarantees, supporting, etc. So the answer to your question is a resounding yes. And the second thing is that we're on our way doing it. We have to work it out. And it's going to be, in my view, two-phase, but it's the future. It's where we have to go.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Chris, may I bring this conversation to you, where I would like you to share from the perspective of our SMEs. I genuinely, deeply believe that the foundation that is being laid and, you know, the pillars that are being moved or built primarily depend on the success of our SMEs, our entrepreneurs. How does this group, or do these groups, take advantage of the opportunities that we're seeing in this exemplary trade and investment between the Caribbean and Africa? And can we find enough funding to push them along?
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Talking about SMEs, I think it's important to put it in context and describe the important role that the SMEs actually play, especially in both regions, in Africa and in the Caribbean. They have very similar characteristics. Close to 90% of the jobs created in these regions are usually by SMEs. Close to 40% of the national income in both regions by the SMEs. So that underscores how important it is that the SMEs are properly funded and the SMEs are properly designed to work well. But I think it's not just for us to focus on the trade between Africa and the Caribbean. It's also important to take a step back and also focus on the trade within Africa itself as a starting point, and the trade within the Caribbean communities itself, which statistics will tell you is extremely low at this point. Economies that have developed because they trade with themselves. North America, if you look at the US, Canada, and Mexico, trades about 69% with itself. Asia trades about 63% with itself. Europe trades about 71% with itself, and that again tells you why you see the kind of development and the kind of infrastructure that supports SMEs. Africa, by last estimates, perhaps trades about 18–20% with itself. And the Caribbeans, I can tell you that the trade is actually low between themselves. I flew straight in here from Jamaica because in Pan-African Capital, we just invested in a Jamaican fund alongside the Jamaican Development Bank. Now, the essence of that fund is an SME fund that is meant to help the SMEs to push forward. And in most of the meetings I had while in Jamaica for 2 days, I found out that if you look at Jamaica, if you look at Dominican Republic, and you look at Haiti, and if you extend it to, say, Cuba, you have about 35 million people in those regions. My inquiries didn't tell me that there was so much trade going on in those regions. We need to also look at how can SMEs in those regions trade, because that's a very huge market. And also, without taking anything off the table, look at the trade between Africa and the Caribbean. But to answer your question directly, the issue of funding for them is important. Now, these are sets of businesses that don't have what the big corporations have. First, they don't have collaterals to give. So how do you support them? So it's important that we create funds, like the last keynote speaker mentioned, create funds that will help, venture capital funds that will help these SMEs. And we realize that most of them actually do not have what it takes to actually prepare before going into these businesses. There are certain project preparations that you should do. How many of them can take the liberty of doing feasibility studies? How many of them have what it takes to invest in CapEx for these businesses? Most times, they get into asset-light businesses, which means that they need a lot of support from factoring businesses. How many factoring businesses do we have? How many people are doing forfeiting in the region? Factoring, forfeiting, and a lot of support from maybe microfinance banks, and then having government also support them in terms of creating the necessary infrastructure is what I think most of the SMEs will need to be able to conquer the problems that apply to SMEs in both regions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oshefe. Thank you very much. Mr. Haynes, I want to bring it to you. You know, we're talking obviously about trade, so clearly we can't have this conversation without talking about the commercial banks, obviously. Now, when it comes to the commercial banks, what would you say the extent of their role is in both, either region or both, in supporting this partnership between Africa and the Caribbean?
Thank you. Am I mic'd? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think the role, well, we're not a commercial bank. We're a merchant bank, investment bank. But nonetheless, I'll talk a little bit about it. I think the role is as a facilitator. I think what we have to have are institutional arrangements that allow businesses from the Caribbean to interact with businesses in Africa, perhaps an AfriCaribbean Chamber of Commerce, something like that. It seems like to me that, so the concept of globalization is the transfer of capital, labor, and information across national boundaries. I don't see that happening. I don't think we have the institutional arrangements in place to do that. So that's one thing I would address. A second thing I would address is the regulatory framework. Take the case of Guyana. Guyana is growing exponentially by leaps and bounds since its discovery of oil in the Atlantic Basin. And what has happened, the business environment has changed, and the demands on institutions providing capital has changed, but the culture and the behavior is lagged behind. It hasn't really caught up with that. And so the regulatory, and there are several regulators on stage here, but the regulatory environment has to be nimble and has to be able to adapt to a changing environment. As it relates to the SMEs, what they need is capacity building. Most of the small businesses, or the MSEs, are what I would consider the core competence model business. And let me unpack that. The core competence model is where you have a skilled person, an electrician, a plumber, a construction worker, and he or she is extremely knowledgeable in that trade. But that in and of itself is not a business. A business has an ecosystem around it, right? And so we look at things like, what are your business analytics? Do you have management accounts? Do you have audited statements? Do you have a CFO? Do you have a legal representation? Do you have a management structure? All of those things together serves to institutionalize the core competence business model. And that's the kind of things investors are looking for. Oftentimes, businesses come into the bank, they're looking for capital, but they're not packaged for financing and capital. We don't make loans, we make investments, and money goes where it's treated best. And capital is not charity, okay? And so risks has to be mitigated. And one of the ways I think we do that is to provide the necessary capacity building that can institutionalize these individuals with various expertise.
Thank you so much. Would you say you can throw in the investment banking angle as well?
Yes, yes. I would, go ahead, sorry.
No, how would you do that? Go ahead, please.
Say that again?
Throw in the investment banking angle as well in terms of facilitating this relationship.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. The investment bank, and we do it, so there's an educational process, right? A small business walks in the door and they're looking for capital. And you have to take a step back and say, okay, have you had a business valuation? Do you have a business plan? We can help you with that. And so while we're arranging and structuring capital, we're also teaching in the process and bringing them along. And that's the role of the investment bank. It's to provide the necessary tools and resources that the SME is looking for, but they may not have. Again, they have the core competence, they're probably extremely good at it, but that ecosystem that surrounds that core competence has to be built up. And we as an investment bank, because we're not constrained by the regulation, we can offer that.
Right.
The commercial banks or retail banks can't necessarily offer that.
Okay. Dr. Ganga was looking at you from the corner of his eye, but that's fine. Now, I saved you for last because your shoulders feel they're getting heavier and heavier because Afreximbank has done so well to create opportunities to bridge this relationship. Your office is in Barbados at the moment. How does that proximity help and facilitate, or better still, accelerate this conversation we're having?
No, thank you very much for your question. And I thank you for your passion moderating this session. Really, you brought life to the room. And we like that passion, and we embrace this kind of passion at Afreximbank in pursuing whatever we want to do.
Thank you. It's a Ghana thing.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, in Afreximbank, let me tell you something first. 8 years ago at Afreximbank, we started a journey of promoting intra-African trade and investment. And while everybody was talking about that the main obstacle to intra-African trade is the lack of infrastructure, we didn't listen to any of that, because we believe that the main obstacle to intra-African trade is the lack of market information, the lack of access to finance, and the perceived market risk on the continent. And we said to ourselves, well, we can do something about that. And that's where we started our journey to promote intra-African trade and investment. We've covered the gap of market information. We brought Africans together, closer. We brought opportunities closer to our clients. We brought African governments together to have a dialogue and conversation on how to integrate and become more, increase the level of intra-African trade. And in doing that, we have innovatively created a lot of new products and programs that are tailor-made specifically for that purpose. And when we decided to come to the Caribbean region, to integrate the region with Africa, everybody also told us that there is no single link between Africa and the Caribbean. What are you guys doing? And guess what? Again, we didn't listen to any of that, and we came. And we came very strongly. We used our experience and used the impact that we've done across the continent promoting intra-African trade. We used that experience into integrating the Caribbean region as well. And the very first thing we did, we came very strongly with our clients, we came with our investors into the region to explore opportunities, and so many opportunities, so many investment opportunities have come up, and we're really amazed about the kind of things that we can do here. And again, we're tweaking our products and programs to fit now those kinds of opportunities and to fit the opportunities that we see in the market here. And that's why you will see us doing quite a lot in less than a year. We are in more than 6 countries of the region, and we are signing transactions, and we're doing a lot of financing. But our role really expands beyond that. Our role really is to promote the linkages between the continent and the Caribbean region, and also the linkages among the Caribbean region itself. And that's why you find so many of our clients here with us. They come, we have clients from Egypt, where I come from. They come with us, and every time we come to the Caribbean, as if they are going from Egypt to Sudan. It has become that close to them, believing in the bank and believing what the role of the bank is doing in the region, and that's really what we are trying to do. And we have our branch in Barbados now open and operative, and this gives us a lot of opportunity to examine the market closer and to identify opportunities in a deeper way, and also to develop the relationship in the region in a better way. And you will hear a lot of the transactions that we'll be doing in the near future.
Ayman, thank you so much. It's so exciting. I've got only 1 minute and 52. Patricia, it would be remiss for me not, on the behalf of the women in this room, to mention. Ladies, are you there? Thank you. Patricia, all of this sounds extraordinary. How do the women take advantage just to make sure that in this newfound partnership, in this new extraordinary making of prosperity, that we don't get left behind?
Well, I think it's important to note that women currently only control less than 10% of the capital in the Caribbean. I'm not sure what the number is in Africa, but I would be surprised if the number was larger. So we already have a situation where 80% of our graduates from university are women, but why is that not translating into capital appreciation for women? So I think one has to, when you examine that, what are the things that we have to do? And some of them have actually been mentioned with respect to the kinds of action that you need to take with respect to SMEs. Not much different. But then you have to focus them on the women themselves. Make sure that you actually have organizations that are dedicating their services to women. That capacity building is important. The mentorship, the networking, all of these things, the education about financial literacy, these are all fundamental things that need to change. And of course, women are generally risk averse, and they're prefer to be a manager than to go out and become an entrepreneur. So, I mean, that's one class of our women. But at the bottom of the pyramid, our women are entrepreneurs. The vendor who is out there every day, how do you translate that woman into being an entrepreneur? And so I think, there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of work being done in all of in both regions. And I see, the famous lady here from Egypt who has been talking about this forever. And, you know, so we have to work. We have to do the fundamental work. And, you know, people criticize, why is it that we talk about gender? Well, you know, when you look at the data tells the truth. And we have to collect the data. When you collect the data, then you can take the actions. And I think this is critical and important. And just a little plug. Our Portland's third fund that we're putting together, we have one part of it which is going to be dedicated to women-owned enterprises. And this has already been launched. And so that will include a whole building of an ecosystem around the women-owned enterprises to make sure that they succeed. So, you know, this is the kind of thing that we have to do.
Thank you, Patricia. And still, since I have the microphone and I can't be fired at this point, perhaps also to say to His Excellency Professor Oramah, maybe you can create a special $1 billion women's fund. Women, help me, because when I get fired, it's because of you. Thank you, Professor Oramah. As you are clapping, sir, I know you will do it before, as His Excellency the President said, before the end of the forum, please. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for my panelists, Ms. Patricia Francis, Chairperson, Trade Facilitation Task Force, Government of Jamaica. We have also the Governor of the Bank of Guyana, Dr. Gobind Ganga. We have the Governor, Central Bank of Barbados, Dr. Kevin Greenwich. We also had Mr. Ayman El Zovi, Acting Director, Trade and Corporate Finance, Afreximbank. Mr. Chris Oshiafi Group, Managing Director, Pan-African Capital Holdings. Last not the least, Mr. Floyd Haynes, Chairman, New Haven Merchant Bank, Guyana. And my name is Anita Erskine from... Ladies and gentlemen, God bless you all.